Thanks, Parveen. Hey, CogX, thank you so much for being with us today. As Parveen said, I am Abidesi Osunsade. I have three incredible leaders from the tech world with me today on this panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. First of all, we have Tasha Litton at Seedcamp. Tasha, please tell me a bit more about who you are.
Hello. Hey, thanks, Abba. I'm Tash. I run all things brand, marketing, and network at Seedcamp. We're a very early stage European investment fund with investments in over 350 incredible founders, including the likes of TransferWise, UiPath, Revolut, and Cup Club, one of the participants in the panel today. And one of my core focuses is really working with our companies in terms of thinking about how they tell their stories and why that's so important, from everything from raising investment to driving customers to hiring amazing people.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Tash. Really excited to pick your brains over the next few minutes. Next up, amazing panelist, Safia Qureshi, who is the CEO of Cup Club. Safia, please tell us more about yourself.
I'm Safia. I'm founder and CEO at Cup Club. We are a returnable packaging brand. So that means we are on a mission to eliminate single-use packaging, specifically in plastics, and replace that with packaging that consumers can return. We started our journey with drinks, and we have a very, very exciting roadmap ahead, but I'd love to share some of the tips and tricks that got us to this point, just to help other founders and early stage companies think through what is important. So really pleased and honored to be here.
Amazing. And last but not least, our third amazing panelist joining us is Therese Carlson, who's the head of marketing at Ericsson. Please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Hi, thanks for that. My name is Therese, and I work at Ericsson One, actually, which is an internal accelerator at Ericsson. We're trying to take all the amazing people that work here and support them in developing new ventures within tech. Our hope is that we will be able to kind of change the world for the better and make sure that we get some new amazing tech innovations out in the market. Thanks.
Amazing. So let's go straight into it. Folks are here because they want to learn ways to nail their story and keep growing regardless of what's happening at a macro level in the world. Recently, Black Lives Matter has been dominating the agenda. I think we are realizing we have a race crisis, a hate crisis, and we want to do a lot to improve as a society. How do entrepreneurs market in a crisis? Tash, I want to start with you. Can you either tell us what not to do or how to keep promoting your service or product when the backdrop is actually quite intense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the last few months in particular, we've been kind of going through like iterations and incredible sort of different things going on in the macro climate. And, you know, fundamentally, as a brand, you're in this real point where you absolutely cannot ignore it and pretend like nothing is going on. But equally, to just blindly be there trying to sell your stuff and, you know, not being aware or reframing your story and your messaging in light of what is going on is incredibly insensitive. So I guess, you know, it's thinking around what is your core as a brand, because that shouldn't change fundamentally, but how do you take into account repositioning in light of things that are going on in the here and now, and then thinking around, you know, well, what does that mean from the medium that we're using as well? You know, even with situations like this, right, we're all online right now. People aren't so much able to come together in real world. How are you rethinking about the way you're getting your messages to people? As well as, you know, when things are changing very fast in the macro climate, lots of people, especially within marketing and in technology, we're always looking at how we can automate things, right, and make our lives easier. But the danger in that, if you've got campaigns running and there's all of this other stuff going on, and the lack of sensitivity or care by just turning some of those things off is, you know, it's a thing that is actually so simple to do, but I've been amazed at how many people have just totally missed the mark and stuff like that.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Safia, I want to pull you in because Cup Club works with some incredible companies, you know, McDonald's, Starbucks. You've obviously been able to appeal to a broad set of stakeholders, from consumers to corporates.
Yeah.
Can you share any philosophies work in terms of messaging about your product for you to this progress?
Okay, first of all, what's interesting when you're building a company and a brand is how very incremental this is. So it's wonderful to get to the point where we are, but we weren't there from day one. And it can, when you look over, you think, gosh, this is so daunting. How would I ever work with X, Y, and Z names when you first set out? So the path to building a brand and a brand that will resonate with people is a very slow process. It's kind of like in the same way that we think about maybe some of the really important things that we buy in our lives, like a property, maybe a car, things that we're not buying every day. I think sometimes our process of learning about a brand and why we want to be excited about it is really where you need to focus your energies most. So why should I care about this particular brand? And then really try and resonate that image or that voice towards people. It's much easier when you have a purpose-driven company. So I guess we have the blessing that we are doing something good in the world. And it is a very clear problem that everybody understands and can resonate with. But before you sort of really try and think about the bigger companies that might buy from you, you have to think about what it is that they will get excited about, which is kind of partly what your question is. And a lot of that is actually your traction. So it is actually about perception. So how is that brand seeing you in the context of all of the other stakeholders? Are they hearing buzz? And word of mouth till this day is the most important process of communication. Social media is important, sure, your number of followers. But really, ultimately, if you're sitting in an exec role or you're sitting in a brand team or you're sitting in an ops team in a major stakeholder company, if somebody tells you about a brand, you're going to be likely higher engagement in that brand. And that's the kind of decision-making power that they have. So I would say our focus in the early stages wasn't to try and target those kind of big names. It was first to target some of the most kind of easily, adopted, your early adoption crew, who you feel will be the ones who will pioneer and talk about your product, and how they then engage with the sort of first or second tier of customers.
Especially early stage, exactly as you said, it's about incrementally building on those best practices and reaching out to early adopters and then going big. I kind of want to bring in Therese now. You're working at Ericsson's Accelerator. What are some of the conversations you've been having with founders as they're thinking about marketing during this crisis? What are some of those conversations and some of the solutions you've offered?
I think in general, working within a big company like I am, where a lot of people come from very heavy tech background, I've seen that a lot of people are developing amazing new technology, but they might still think that good technology or a good solution will sell itself. So I think there has been quite a lot of work with trying to really connect that to the customer and who they're actually trying to target and what the value is they're offering. And I think that goes now, but also in a time of crisis, it's really not that big of a difference. It's about understanding who are we trying to reach, and this is a completely new product. So how can we make sure that is going ahead and that people understand that we are actually providing value? And I think it really comes down to understanding who you're targeting, who is the potential end customer, especially since we usually are selling to like a B2B, B2C type of business. So I think for us, it's been coming down a lot to really trying to focus in on what are we trying to do and stay really, really targeted in that now and beyond the crisis.
Can I jump in? Because there was something that sort of, Safia, particularly that you mentioned that I think was quite interesting. Like, one, this idea around purpose, but then also the importance of advocacy, right? And 100%, especially when you're a small business, word of mouth is what drives it. But, we're talking here about your story, and fundamentally, someone is going to say one thing about your story to somebody else. And what is that one thing? And is that one thing impactful enough to make them then want to, purchase or convert or actually use your proposition. And this is the thing I think that often startup brands in particular get wrong, because they sort of want to be for everyone. It's like, we're doing this and we're going to change the world for everyone. And that's great as the kind of big vision for your organization. But actually, in terms of your story and thinking about how you take customers on that journey along with you, you have to be more specific. And, if you think of some of the great brands that you'd maybe consider as brands that have kind of purpose or sustainability underneath it, it's very simple to share and tell someone about it. So if you think about someone like Bulb in the energy space, that Bulb is about renewable. And so it's very simple for you to be like, energy, normally this big evil giant, but Bulb, they're the nice guys because they're trying to do it in a more renewable way. Or even, people like Toms, who back in the day were, one of the first who really kind of pioneered this kind of give one, get one idea. And that was so simple, and then now I think people try and complicate things or just aren't actually clear enough on what is that one thing that you want people to advocate, for your brand. And how do you do an amazing job of just reinforcing that across everyone and everything?
Yeah. I think also to tail on that, process is everything. So I have had a lot of early stage mentors. So I'm a big advocate for female founders, and I do a couple of sessions, 20-minute calls or 30-minute calls on Friday. And I get a lot of questions about how have you gone about trying to actually define the brand? And I get some who will say, I've just kind of decided on a name and I've bought the website. And that you need to kind of also appreciate there has to be a very clear process. Brand building isn't something you just kind of do from a name. Even the name has to be informed by your values. And following a process will get you to a really strong narrative. Believe me. And it's also, once you've done it, it's like building the foundations for then what you will go on to do. So it's worth the investment, it's worth the time, it's worth the engagement with your customers, with your demographics. If you're already a mature company, you're going to do it again. And I have some key, if you want me to quickly run through, I'm always a structured person. But I would definitely say that you've got to think about the value proposition first. And that's key. And if possible, get an amazing team to help you do this, because sometimes you doing it with your own team might not be enough. And you do need to get a lot of skills to come in. So Seedcam have been a big part of it, but we've worked with RGA, for example, communications agency. And there's a really clear way to actually define a brand. So I would definitely try and do that before you kind of really think about it in terms of long-term and channels and how you get together.
Yeah, I think if I
just following off the back of that. Oh yeah, come on.
No, I think
Therese, go ahead.
So true about kind of following that process, and I can see that you have your own startup. You're really eager to get out there, and you really just want to make that sale. But I think you need to understand where the customer is coming from. They've never heard anything about you. They don't know who the company is. They don't know what the product is or what your value has. So you need to kind of work on those first steps first, create some awareness, make people know who you are. And that's kind of how you then can build on your story and then inform kind of more detailed, what are you doing to in the end kind of really achieve that, intent and make people actually willing to do the sales. So I think it's so true about the process. You really need to kind of slowly build up your offering and explaining what it is you're actually contributing with, and not try to force people into buying your product when they have no idea who you are. And I know you're eager. Everyone is eager when they're starting out, but you really need to kind of be brave and try to talk to people and make them aware.
Thanks for that. So building off the back of the importance of process and the importance of bringing in people with expertise, how do we then move on to bringing in data from our community? Talk to us a bit, Tash, first of all, about either the metrics that founders should be thinking about when they're first thinking about these marketing strategies, or what kind of data is most valuable when thinking about how to authentically connect with the different types of people in their community?
I guess there's always the kind of two sides, right? One is the vanity metrics, which I think more often than not, people get themselves really blinded by like followers and likes and things that fundamentally mean absolutely jack shit. And then the other one is the actual data-driven stuff that takes time to build, because until you have customers, you have no data, right? And actually one of the things that I was talking about with one of our companies just this morning was around how you leverage your community. And we were talking about the name. They've got a horrible name that nobody can pronounce. And I was like, guys, now is the time to do something about this. And they were like, no, but we've got this active community around it. So it's like, cool, so let's use them to try and change your name, right? And, you know, I was thinking back to, and I remembered this had happened with Monzo, right? And I was like, Monzo did this amazing job. And then for the life of me, like, I couldn't even remember how they changed their name, because it's become so ingrained now that it is Monzo. And it was just Mondo, because I remember my friend being like, they changed a D to a Z and that was it. But it's, you know, it's thinking around things like, actually, you know, if it's something like community, how can you actually leverage your community to make changes? When it comes to data, you know, as a startup, I think that, you know, startups for the most part are very, very, very data driven, often to the detriment. They put all of their money when it comes to marketing into Facebook. They think there is this one golden bullet and, you know, Facebook is going to stay at that CPA forevermore. And, you know, that's the only way we're ever going to get customers. And, you know, what they're not doing is putting enough into experimentation and creativity. Like, you should really be thinking, you know, 80-20 applies really across everything when it comes to marketing, and allowing yourself that 20% like free reign license for exploration, as well as thinking, you know, okay, we are converting at this from something perhaps very functional and metric driven. What would happen if we actually thought more creatively, or if we changed how this looked visually, or the channel? Like, could we actually improve our CPAs as a result? And giving yourself the license to actually do that, while also knowing that, you know, the beauty of being in a small growing company is if something doesn't work, you experiment and you can turn it on and off very quickly.
That's really interesting. And I love that you brought up Facebook, because this is something I want to ask Safia and Therese about, of where we invest to bring awareness to our brands. A lot of people are feeling like there has to be less done in terms of paid performance marketing and more done in terms of companies, direct content, driving content, and building community. So I'm going to start with Safia first. Is this something that you have been considering in terms of long-term strategy for Cup Club? And then on to Therese to hear whether this is a conversation happening in your founder community as well.
So so just to kind of first of all set the tone, is we've barely spent any money on marketing. So when I talk about 2019 budget was maybe 10K for the whole year. And that is a very small amount. It isn't something that I would necessarily say is the amount that you need to really scale your company. We've done everything organically, and we've been featured and spoken to about on pretty much every single channel out there humanly possible, and never paid a penny for it, which is amazing. However, there's a caveat. There's a caveat because you can piggy off you know, articles written with you in context, but not specifically with your story leading it. So there's a difference. There's a difference between a headline that says McDonald's and Starbucks are working with X company to launch reusables. X company, somewhere in paragraph 2, mentions Cup Club. Great. That's wonderful. It's in Bloomberg. Great. So a lot of people in finance and the right kind of people will be reading it. Fantastic. It isn't. Cup Club launches its product in the US market with these brands. So I think the thing that I'm trying to say is that there's an inflection point, which certainly we feel we're at, where our product has been very well received. Our brand has gotten to a certain stage, completely with like barely any marketing budgets, riding off the wave of the fact that we've designed something that clearly people desire. Great. The next stage, if we want to go for hypergrowth, is we will have to force it and push it out into channels, into spaces, into places where people who maybe don't have any visibility of us will need to engage with us and build that relationship before buying. Great. So these are two different stages of the company. So I'm going to obviously give you my leanings and understanding of one and how we're slowly going to the second stage. So our US launch, for example, was a really good place for me in the first instance to understand, okay, well, oof, this is like a drop in the ocean. We're not a US brand. We're suddenly in Palo Alto. Nobody here knows us, besides a couple of retail customers that we're working with. So what we decided to do was to lean on them, lean on their crew, lean on their engaged, very, very well-oiled system, and actually just plug into their community. Because it, like I said, it takes a very long time to build an authentic community. And by authentic, I mean that kind of community who believe in you and who will still watch your posts and your IG stories well into month 1, 2, and 3. They're not just doing it on a whim. And it's those kind of people that you want to try and engage with in every city that you launch with, but that isn't something you can buy. So our strategy wasn't to try and throw a shit ton of money into Facebook marketing and Google. It was actually to leverage the existing base that these particular retail outlets that we were working with had on their own email platforms that they had a really strong relationship with, and they were sending them constant weekly updates on new product releases. And so we said, great, we need to tap into that community. How do we get to that community? Okay, can you mention Cup Club in here and link it to our website? And then hopefully we'll drive them to us, and then hopefully they'll sign up, and then we'll get them on our mailing lists. And great, boom, we've got 500 people in Palo Alto who are really excited about us. That's then how you start to grow that. So so for the first phase of founders and CEOs who are watching this, and you don't have a budget, I would say growth hack your way into this in the same way that we did, and the same way that we still do. I've just described, the way that we did it in a new market, and it's incredibly daunting and terrifying to feel that you're exposing yourself to an environment where you don't have the comfort of knowing every single NGO entity down there who's used your product, every single major stakeholder or brand, every single zero waste warrior and champion online. These things take time. But there are very quick hacks with which we've done it.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think the key is to really find what metrics and what KPIs are relevant for you. I think it's so common that everyone feels like I need to have that Instagram channel, I need to have that Facebook channel, I need to put a lot of money behind paid ads. But it really comes down to what you're doing, who you're trying to reach, and where are these people? There might be cheap or free ways to actually reach that person. But I think it's also important to, Tashnet mentioned, vanity KPIs, and I think that's like really something to keep your eye on. You want to know where you're trying to achieve. You want to put up measurable KPIs, but you also want to be able to optimize them and actually do changes in order to kind of make your marketing strategy working. And I heard someone describing it as the data monster. We're just kind of feeding this data monster information or results or KPIs. Like we check into a hotel and we get an evaluation form. How good was your stay? How good was your checking? And then we go to the hairdresser and we got the same mail. And then we go, I don't know, our broker or Amazon, whatever it is. And these are just numbers that go straight into kind of putting up a review, but it actually doesn't feed back into your organization in order to make you better, in order to kind of improve what you're doing. So it's also important to think when we're talking about metrics and we're talking about campaigns, it's like, why are you doing it? Why are you measuring this? And is anyone looking at it? And are your customers annoyed at you kind of collecting all this information that you do nothing with? And I think that's kind of somewhere where you need to land. Why are we doing what we're doing? And it goes for all marketing, I think.
One of the things I think that's actually been really interesting, the shift I've been noticing, obviously it's been a little while since I've got on the tube, but the last kind of 18 months or so, anytime I've gone on the tube, all I see advertising is startups. And, fast forward, like if we rewind about 5 years back, I remember kind of launching ad campaigns for startup businesses, and trying to get that over the line was so difficult because it's like, well, what's it actually going to deliver? Like, what are the hard numbers? Whereas now startups are really realizing it's not about hard numbers conversion. It's about this idea that we need to build brand trust, and brand trust is intangible and it's so difficult to measure. But how do we do that? Well, we do that by making it seem like we're a lot bigger than we are. And what are the sort of things that people believe in? It's like, oh, well, if they see us on TV or if they see us on a tube ad, even though we might have strategically just bought like that one ad there, they don't know that, right? And so I think you're really seeing this because startups are learning that actually to get the big metrics and to really change things, they have to build trust and be seen as a legitimate company. And it's about doing things that seem bigger than just doing a sort of Facebook ad like digital marketing blitz in order to share that feeling, because it's emotional as much as it is, just metrics here.
But then I also think it's so important to get that kind of PR aspect in there, because that's also how you become visible on a big scale and in trusted magazine or by trusted people. And all of a sudden you're building up a belief in your brand by having other people kind of validate you. But it's actually might not cost you that much money. It's about building relationships with people that can kind of help promote you.
And I think it is just dovetailing that, right? Because PR does not mean sales. And I've definitely seen, we can all get blinded by this idea, well, they're getting spoken about all the time. It's like, cool, but what are you doing actually alongside that? Like and big picture, like longer term stuff to actually get like sales happening now, which is fundamentally what businesses, especially small businesses, need to be doing.
And there's an example I've got actually to share about trust building. One of the key aspects of work that we did before we launched, and part and for any viewers who maybe don't know what we do, but Cup Club's entire premise is to eliminate single-use packaging, but we want to know if we do that by how is our system better, and by how much, and be able to actually measure it. So that really did mean that we, this is the 1 year where we actually did have a decent marketing budget, where we did a life cycle assessment. And it's going to sound strange when I'm saying that it actually came out of the marketing and comms budget, because it is a way of building confidence and trust behind what it is that you're building. There's an incredible amount of businesses out there that do a really good job at greenwashing, that describe themselves as eco-green, having produced something that might be compostable or biodegradable, or the likes of, I'm not going to name any, but the issue is that there are very few that are data backed. And one of our key stances was, if we want to set ourselves as a genuine brand, how do we go about doing that? And when I was setting up the company in 2015, at that time, Impossible Burger had just started to kind of rise. And they had launched not a life cycle assessment, but they had done an entire report on specifically what it is that's in their burger, how it's produced, and why it's better than meat. And they turned it into this beautiful document, which they used as a marketing tool. And they didn't just share it with stakeholders, they shared it online, they made it open for people to engage with and ask them questions, and they did Meet the Founder kind of event. And I felt that was actually a really clever tool to use in a way to promote your main agenda, but also validate and build trust amongst your community. Not just users, but also your customers. And I think that could be something that more brands could do to give them that validation personally. It does require effort. It does require a great deal of thinking and organization, but I think it is definitely worth doing to set yourself apart. Now, it's taken us to really amazing places personally. So I would highly recommend, if you are setting up a sustainable product or brand or service, to look into that.
I thought it'd be great expertise here to think of a resource, whether that's a book, an article, like resource like the one you just mentioned, Safia, that you feel has like made a really big impact on how you have thought about your brand, your voice, and how you engage with customers. If you can think of that resource, whether that's a book or an article that you can share, that would be great. And then the second thing I want each of you to also share as well is a brand that has been really speaking to you on a personal level over the last few months. They've continued communicating about their product and service in this time of and everything else has touched you positively in a personal way. So resource and a brand that you've really admired on a personal level the last few months. Let's start with Therese, and then Safia, and then Tash.
Yeah, sure. I think a case that really inspired me is I believe it's I think they're Finnish. It's the brand called Kern, and you're all seeing their logo on elevators and escalators and so on. And the mission statement is like, let people flow, or let people like easily go by. And I think that's I love that mission statement because it really shows how a company that is doing something that is super driven by technology. They're doing escalators and elevators, right? But also quite unsexy, to be fair. They are attracting some of the best engineers in the industry, and they managed to stay afloat for over 100 years. And I think by kind of defining that mission statement and really building their whole business based on that, and it's not about building the best escalator, it's about making people go from point A to point B in an easy way. Someone, you know, skipping, not having to walk 200 steps, or fastly getting from one level to another to not be late to their meeting. I think that's a super inspiring case that I really love. And for book, I've read a book by Magnus Penker. He's a Swedish world-known CEO, one of the top 100, blah blah blah. And he wrote a book called Innovation Guru, which I think it's really nice on how to kind of develop your brand and also really work on innovation and how to make sure that you're staying ahead with all your innovative business, basically.
Thank you.
So mine's going to be very tailored to us. So some of these references might be in the food and beverage industry, because it's just me looking at the reaction of some of the potential or prospective customers or people in the industry around food and beverage. And I think the ones that stood out for me initially were Pret. Pret were the first ones to come forward and offer their support during COVID to the frontline workers. This was before it was a thing. They led that. And I found it interesting how it soon avalanched into everybody sending things to frontline workers. That was everybody's response, from like beauty products, creams, to sanitary ware, to coffees, to like everything under the sun suddenly. But I felt that they did it in a very genuine way, and it's hard to sometimes lead the way with something that's never been done before. And I really value the brave stance that they took to make that happen. And they're a large organization, and they worked really quickly to do that as well. So you have to give it to them. They did it fast and they did it effectively, and it wasn't just a marketing exercise, it was genuine. So I think the others that I felt created a lot of sensitivity for me, and I think that's really ultimately it. COVID, Black Lives Matter, all of these things, all these events are really important. And brands that really showed sensitivity, one of them was, for me, Blue Bottle. And I felt that not opening their stores, keeping all of their staff and employees indoors safe during COVID, and allowing them to go out and protest, and then, you know, putting really big checks down to support their cause. Again, being the first few to do that, for me was an amazing statement. And I'm not saying every company is in a position to do that, of course, but they did. So these were very exciting. Personal brand loves are always Patagonia, and I cite this all the time with anybody who asks me on what was the sort of path that you think about reuse. Patagonia is always passionate about not just selling their products, but following the journey and story of what happened to those products that they did sell. And there's this brilliant campaign that had a picture of their jacket pressed out saying, do not buy this. Or I think it was reusing, I've totally forgotten the slogan now. Do not buy me, not sure, one of them. But basically say, don't buy me, fix me. And they made a documentary series that followed some of the people who had been actively just going and getting their products mended, who had had them for like 10 and 20 years, had passed them on to their children, and their children were wearing it. And for me, that was a fantastic brand story. It's not like in their store they're not selling things, but they're definitely preparing people for an image of, you know, our products are for life. And for me, that again is very genuine, which is kind of what I seem to be coming back to. Is I feel like that's a really important part of your brand building exercise. So I think that's
wonderful. Great example. Thank you. Last but not least, Tash, the brands that have made a connection to you in this time, and then I'm going to wrap up. So.
Cool. So just really quickly, I think Nike always does an exceptional job. And what I love about Nike and, you know, for how they change their campaign message now to, for once, don't do it. Like, I think on the one hand, I look at Nike's executive board and I'm kind of like, oh, is this all just like utter bullshit and kind of, you know, corporate job? And then I think about how they've championed and used people like Colin Kaepernick, how, you know, they've actually sort of, you know, this idea of like, believe in something even if it means losing everything. And I think Nike's always been there to take a stand, and so it feels real to me when they do it now. And then just really quickly on resources, I think Rory Sutherland, Dan Ariely, everyone's sort of looking at behavioral economics and why consumers make decisions and how we actually position things to them. Like, just to really quickly wrap up, you know, I think one of the best examples I remember hearing Rory Sutherland talk about was how, you know, the video call had been positioned as a poor man's flight, which was why everyone always was traveling for business meetings, because it was seen that if you didn't make that effort, you didn't care. Whereas now the whole world's changed and like it's been positioned totally differently. So for me, there's some really interesting thinking from people like that around how we actually frame our businesses and whether that drives adoption or not.
Amazing. Well, huge thank you to all of the panelists. I know we are coming back on the hour for Q&A, but just want to say thank you, Therese and Safia and Tash, and see you in the Q&A, audience.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.